Gunpowder armies are some of the strongest builds you can use in Warhammer 3. They deal massive damage, control the battlefield, and, when everything works, they are incredibly consistent. But there are certain battles where that same approach starts to feel limited. It's not because gunpowder is weak, and it's not because your army is built wrong. It's because some battles don't really reward a static, position-based playstyle. And in those situations, there is a completely different way to build and play gunpowder. There are several problems static gunpowder armies always face. First, there is a backline, the soft spot, which is entirely dependent on formation and positioning. Then, you need a strong control to keep enemies at distance. You also need to know all enemy units well to properly choose right targets in the right order. Next, there are line of sight issues across different maps, and against overwhelming numbers, static armies require good tactics, comps, and setups. Because all of this, static gunpowder armies can easily get crushed if you're not doing everything right. I covered all you need to know in my video why gunpowder armies get overwhelmed. The link is in description. So instead of micromanaging everything, there is a completely different approach that's actually stronger in some situations. Most notably against melee-heavy factions with large numbers, like vampires, greenskins, ogres, and Norska. You can build mobile gunpowder armies that completely remove biggest weaknesses of static formations. Instead of building around a fixed position, mobile gunpowder armies are built around movement. You are not setting up a formation and holding it. Instead, you are constantly repositioning, adjusting distance, and picking up the engagements throughout the battle. Next, there is no backline, so you do not have to worry about flanks protection or flyers bypassing your front line. Main strength of mobile armies is not front-loaded into one specific part of the army, but evenly spread across all units. This changes how the entire army behaves. And finally, you are not controlling the enemy, but your own army. With static armies, you try to keep the distance by not allowing enemy units to get close, and with mobile armies, you stay away from the enemy by moving your own units. You are not waiting for the enemy to come to you, you are controlling how close they will ever get. As for positioning, this is not something you solve at the start of the battle, but you keep adjusting the entire time. If the angle is bad, you move. If terrain blocks you, you reposition. You are never locked into a bad setup with constant line of sight problems. Engagements are where the biggest gameplay shift happens. You are not reacting to engagements, you dictate where they happen. And it's on you to decide where fights will take place on the map and, more importantly, where they won't. However, that comes with a trade-off, as you don't always get perfect target selection, especially when you're being chased or pressured. Sometimes you will have to target closest unit instead of most important one. So why does this feel so effective in certain battles? The biggest reason why is because it avoids the situations where gunpowder armies usually struggle. There is no single point in the army that, once pressured, causes everything to fall apart, like the front line. You also don't have a backline that, if it's locked in melee, entire army stops doing damage. You're not permanently punished for a bad setup or one mistake. You can always change your position during the battle, and also you're not forced into fights you don't want to take. You can always fight on your own terms. So it's not that mobile gunpowder army is stronger in terms of raw power, it's that it removes a lot of the situations where things usually go wrong. However, all of these benefits do not mean mobile gunpowder armies have no weaknesses. In fact, they introduce a completely different set of problems. First, there is a micro. You have to actively control everything, movement, spacing, and timing. If you lose that control, even briefly, units can get caught and die or become ineffective. Next, this approach depends heavily on having enough room to move. On smaller maps or maps with dense terrain, speed advantage will easily disappear. And one of the biggest issues are sieges. In sieges, you're often forced into the exact type of fights you're trying to avoid. Dense streets and corridors limit your movement, and while you can shoot through the open door, just like with any gunnery units, with less models and bigger gaps between models in unit, it will drastically slow down the process. There are exceptions, like flying mobile gunpowder armies, but those play by completely different rules. So while mobile gunpowder avoids a lot of usual problems, it replaces them with a different kind of difficulty. And that's where the real comparison starts. So both of these approaches work, they just perform better in completely different situations. Static gunpowder armies are more consistent. Even in bad situations, you usually still have a fighting chance. You have a formation, you have damage, and you can always trade. Next, static armies usually have more models and more guns firing at once. This means higher overall damage output and damage per volley, which leads to faster battles. You're not moving and dragging fights out, you set the army, engage, and do the best you can for a short period. Static gunpowder armies usually have longer range, so against other missile factions, they are a clear winner. And also static armies are much better in sieges, where you can demolish towers, create firing positions, and systematically clear out defenses. You're not relying on movement, which is heavily restricted in cities. So static gunpowder is better when you can control the battlefield through positioning, range, and raw damage, but there are certain scenarios where mobility has clear advantage. Mobile gunpowder units really shine against melee rush factions, especially if they do not have any ranged pressure. Here you can take your time and win battles with minimal losses. Just keep the distance, kite consistently, and deal damage. This is even better against factions like vampires or demons, or unbreakable units, where units do not rout at all, and you have to kill each unit down to the last model. Third scenario where mobility wins is against enemies with summons. You do not have a fixed backline to protect, so summons do not create the same kind of threat as you don't suddenly lose artillery or key units because something appeared behind you. The same applies against army abilities. Bombardments, nukes, or spells are much easier to avoid. You're not locked into position, you can just move out of the way with high movement speed. So mobile gunpowder is strongest when the enemy wants to force engagements, but doesn't have the tools to pressure you at range. So to summarize, static armies are more consistent, they work in most situations, while mobile armies are more extreme, and when they work, they dominate. But when the situation doesn't fit them, they struggle much more. So it's not about which one is better, it's about which one fits the battle you are fighting. And if you feel confident to run pure static gunpowder armies, there is a lot you can do to increase its damage and effectiveness. I explained everything in this video, so go and watch it next. See ya.